So, I'd really like to tell you a fictional story because I do believe that the creation of personalized human mirrors, especially if they are sound and flattering, is the noblest endeavor one can engage in. This is especially true at this time in my life, as I don't have many chances to be creative, though I do spend all of my time writing about other people's writing. You see, I'm one step removed from my passion, and everyone knows that passion is the engine that drives our imaginations, and that we were born to work. Also, I'm an admirer of Alford Pursell in this wonderful reading series, Why There Are Words. Many of you might not know this, but the first article I sold to the Chronicle, and the first time I realized I might be able to support myself by supporting my friends, was a profile I did of Peg to announce the first installment of this reading series. That was, I think, 19 months ago, and in that time I've written countless articles, but only 2 short stories, maybe, and neither one of those have anything to do with culpability. When Peg asked me to read something, I sent back an immediate enthusiastic yes, and then thought, shit, so many times. What have I done? And more importantly, what am I going to do? But it came to me last week, though, as I was sitting in court listening to a judge recount the story of one Ferdinand Palade, or so I will call him. Though if you pick up the Chronicle, I'm sure you can find his real name and perhaps, in fact, already know all about him. This was my first time being summoned for jury duty, and I had no idea what to expect. The courtroom is austere, above all, with 2 rows of church-like pews, plush but worn beige carpet, an American flag on one side of the judge's bench, and a flag of the state of California on the other side. The walls were bare and somewhat eggshell, I guess, a color just not white enough to require another name. Being in this courtroom, and I've been in an unhealthy handful, it was like a combination of the reverence you feel in a hallowed spot, like the middle of a lake at daybreak, while fishing with your grandfather, or a clearing in the midst of the forest, and the hypocrisy that fills our jail systems and exonerates criminals due no other reason but maximum occupancy. It was like the first day of class in a new school in a new state, a beginning, so technically exciting, but you don't expect to know anybody, and nobody cares about you or your story. Too concerned with their own, I suppose. So I was nervous and snuck a piece of gum to stay focused. I chew a lot of Trident. So often I wander, but sometimes we find ourselves in situations that can affect the rest of our lives. Certainly my life was not on the line, but I do believe the defendant's, that is, Ferdinand Palade's, life was. As the judge explained it, and I will just call the judge, F. Palade is an older gentleman, and by that I mean a senior citizen, with no family, no job, and no money, living as a drifter amongst the streets of our city. He did not offer more of F's background, except to say he has no criminal record and was, according to all accounts, an upstanding citizen, who has lived his life according to some ethical code, however vague, had lost his job in the downturn, but due no fault of his own, etc., etc. This is a familiar story by now. But the judge even went so far as to say that Ferdinand gave the impression of someone who was telling the truth, and that the court had no reason to believe the contrary. On June 6th, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Ferdinand Palade walked into the Bank of America on 23rd and Mission. After waiting patiently in line, he approached the teller, let's call her Yasmin. He approached and explained, quite calmly, that he needed her to put exactly $1 in an envelope and slide it through the window. On the videotape, Yasmin is clearly confused. You want to withdraw dollars, sir? Do you have an account with us? And so on. Although it turns out that Ferdinand did not have a gun, he threatened to shoot Yasmin if she did not give him the money in an envelope through the glass. I forgot to mention that there were about 100 of us in the room, potential jurors hearing this story for the first time. As the judge was explaining it, one of the potential jurors, a very rich man, from his cufflinks to his strategy, raised his hand about every half minute. What were the security guards doing? Has Yasmin been adequately trained for this? What is standard procedure for a bank teller at 23rd and Mission anyway? And clearly, this jury duty was not in this man's best interest, and he seemed to think it was not in the public interest either, as he could be better serving the rest of us in whichever way he already served. Eventually, the judge, an old Southern boy with the full and sallow face of a serious man, long resigned to the most affordable justice, that is, heavy, though well-built, slow-moving, and almost expressionless. This man dismissed Mr. Cufflinks with a nonchalant flick of the wrist, maybe even half a flick. Cufflinks, visibly relieved, stood up, plainly bending pleasure into his solemn countenance, made an almost invisible nod toward the judge as though the man had understood and done right by his country. And, for the record, I would not have wanted this man on my jury either, so I cannot disagree with the judge. The thing is, and I'm sorry to dwell on this jury and not the man and his story, but so many of the potential jurors were obviously trying to get out of their duty, lying unabashedly about prior experiences that might make me biased or extreme personal prejudice against homeless people. This one woman, no older than 25, explained that she did not believe in right or wrong at all and therefore did not care what happened to Ferdinand or to her. Boy, was she questioned further. Her education was short-lived but thorough, and she called herself a Nietzschean nihilist, which, she explained, is not really a nihilist at all, but an optimist, truly, a proper optimist. The questioning continued until it seemed the defense was nothing more than curious about this woman. She did say some interesting things, like the word proptimist. Optimism is only a prop, like any philosophy, that helps one maneuver through a finite span of an infinite dimensionality. I thought that alone enough to dismiss her. Such a beautiful sentence. The defense loved her, of course, and she was forced to stay. After all, Ferdinand's case was that he needed health insurance and couldn't afford it. He had degenerative cancer, and without a residence, he did not qualify for Healthy San Francisco, the city's experimental coverage for the uninsured. Ferdinand didn't know what else to do. Prison is far, far better than physical degeneration, he said, and there's no one depending on me. I didn't harm anyone, didn't take anything of value, never even asked for it. I have worked my entire life, he said, and for nothing. He was born here, apparently, and he would die here. It's up to the state, he said. How? It was at this moment that I knew what to do. I would march right out of that courtroom and brush up on my politics. I would vote Ferdinand Pallid for every government position that became available and write letters to our congressional representatives on lilac-scented stationery laced with venomous vitriol. I would preach from every lectern I could find. Stealing is sometimes okay. And asking for $1, it's not a crime. Better from the bank than from me, trying to walk across town to interview someone for a couple of meals and a publishing credit. But only people with money get loans, even the small ones, and a corporation, though possessing all the rights of an individual, has none of the feelings. So I raised my hand. If lying is wrong, and to my mind this is the only wrong that F. Pallid has committed, why is the defendant guilty and these other potential jurors okay to go? I mean, are they or are they not just as guilty? Are they? Raise your hand if you would raise your hand. You don't have to, just raise it if you would. Please rise for the honorable justice system of the United States of America. Please rise for the homeless. Please rise for the worst that could happen. Please rise, for the best that can happen is inside of you. Give yourself and everyone around you a hand. Tell your friends why there are words. Wow.